The rain drummed against the window of the small apartment in Portland, Oregon, creating a rhythm that matched the heaviness in Margaret's chest. She sat at her kitchen table, the same Formica surface where she'd served countless dinners to her daughters years ago, now cluttered with unopened birthday cards from acquaintances and a calendar marked with a red circle around October 7th, her 60th birthday. The apartment felt too quiet. The heating system hummed, the refrigerator clicked on and off, but there were no voices, no laughter, no phone calls she was hoping would come. Margaret wrapped her cardigan tighter around herself, though the chill she felt had nothing to do with the autumn weather outside. Her phone sat silent on the table. She'd checked it 4 times in the past hour. No messages from Rachel or Jennifer, her daughters. The thought of them sent a familiar ache through her heart, a wound that had been opened so many times it never quite healed. "I did my best," Margaret whispered to the empty room, her voice cracking. But had she? The question haunted her, especially now, as she stood at the threshold of 60 with nothing but regrets and unanswered questions. She picked up a framed photo from the shelf. Rachel at 12, Jennifer at 9, both smiling at Cannon Beach, building sandcastles. That was before the divorce, before everything fell apart. Before she'd had to work double shifts at the hospital, before exhaustion made her short-tempered, before the girls learned to resent her absence more than appreciate her sacrifice. The tears came suddenly, hot and overwhelming. Margaret let them fall, too tired to fight them anymore. In 5 days she would turn 60. She would wake up alone, eat breakfast alone, and probably go to bed having spoken to no one but the cashier at Safeway. "Jesus," she whispered, surprised by the word that escaped her lips. She hadn't really prayed in years. Not since her mother died. Not since she'd felt so abandoned by everything and everyone that faith seemed like one more loss she couldn't afford. "I don't even know if you're listening." Her phone buzzed. Heart leaping, Margaret grabbed it. Maybe one of her daughters had, but no. It was just a spam message about car insurance. She slumped back in her chair, wiping her eyes with the sleeve of her cardigan. The apartment felt smaller suddenly, the walls pressing in. She thought about her co-worker Linda, who'd retired last month with a party, surrounded by children and grandchildren. She thought about her neighbor, Mrs. Chen, whose family visited every Sunday with food and laughter that spilled into the hallway. What had Margaret done wrong? Where had the years gone? And how had she ended up here, so utterly alone? The rain continued to fall as darkness settled over Portland. Margaret sat at her table, surrounded by the ghosts of better days, wondering if redemption was even possible at this age, or if some mistakes were simply too deep to heal. The morning of October 4th dawned grey and cold. Margaret had barely slept, her mind churning with memories and regrets. By 7 a.m., she couldn't stand the silence of her apartment anymore. She grabbed her coat and walked the 3 blocks to Common Grounds, a small coffee shop she'd passed 100 times, but rarely entered. The warmth hit her immediately, both the temperature and something else, something she couldn't quite name. The smell of fresh coffee and cinnamon rolls, the murmur of conversation, the hiss of the espresso machine. Life. The shop was alive in a way her apartment wasn't. "What can I get you, hun?" The barista was a young woman with kind eyes and a nose ring. "Just a black coffee, please," Margaret said, her voice rusty from disuse. "You sure? Our maple lattes are amazing on cold days like this." Margaret hesitated, then found herself nodding. "Okay, I'll try one. Good choice." The girl, her name tag said Sophie, grinned. "I'm making this one extra special because you look like you could use some warmth." The simple kindness made Margaret's throat tighten. She paid and moved to a corner table by the window, watching the rain-soaked streets of Portland come to life. Commuters hurried past with umbrellas, buses splashed through puddles. A man walked his dog in a ridiculous yellow raincoat. "Here you go." Sophie appeared with the latte, topped with perfect foam art. A heart. "I'm Sophie, by the way. Haven't seen you here before." "Margaret. I live nearby, just needed to get out today." Sophie pulled out the opposite chair. "Mind if I sit for a sec?" It's dead in here before the morning rush." Margaret was surprised, but gestured for her to sit. She wasn't used to people wanting her company. "So what brings you out in this miserable weather?" Sophie asked, wrapping her hands around her own coffee cup. "My birthday's in 3 days," Margaret found herself saying. 60. That's a big one. You celebrating?" The question hit harder than intended. Margaret looked down at her latte. "Not really. My daughters and we're not close." Sophie's expression softened. "I'm sorry. That must be really hard." "I wasn't always a good mother," Margaret admitted, words spilling out that she'd never said aloud. "I was working all the time after their father left. 2 jobs, sometimes 3. I was exhausted, angry. I said things, did things I regret. And now they're grown, and they don't want anything to do with me. Have you tried reaching out? Every holiday, every birthday. They respond with one-word texts if I'm lucky. Most of the time, nothing." Sophie was quiet for a moment, then leaned forward. "Can I tell you something? My mum and I didn't speak for 3 years. 3 years! I hated her for divorcing my dad, for all the chaos that followed. I said terrible things to her. What changed?" Margaret asked, desperate to know. She kept showing up, not in pushy ways, but she'd send me cards, leave voicemails just saying she loved me, that she was sorry, that she wanted to understand my pain. And one day I was at my lowest point, lost my job, broke up with my boyfriend, and I called her. And she answered, and she listened, really listened, without defending herself or making excuses. That was the beginning. Margaret felt tears welling again. "It's been so long. I don't even know where to start." "Maybe start with yourself," Sophie said gently. "You can't fix things with them if you're drowning. And forgiveness, real forgiveness, starts here." She tapped her chest. "You gotta forgive yourself first." The door chimed as more customers entered. Sophie stood up. "Look, I work here every morning. Come back tomorrow. I'd love to hear how you're doing." After Sophie returned to the counter, Margaret sat with her cooling latte, looking at the foam heart that was slowly dissolving. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel completely alone. A stranger had listened. A stranger had cared. As she left the coffee shop, she noticed something across the street, a small church with a sign, "Community Dinner, Thursdays, 6 p.m., all welcome." Thursday was tomorrow. Margaret hesitated, then took a photo of the sign with her phone. Maybe, just maybe, there was still a path forward.